Tonight, you will pick up your phone without deciding to. You won't remember unlocking it. You won't remember why. Your thumb will move before your mind catches up. It happens fast. It happens quietly. And by the time you notice, 20 minutes are already gone. This isn't a lack of willpower. It isn't laziness. And it isn't your fault in the way you think it is. Because you didn't wander into this hole by accident. You were led into it. And the people who built the tunnel knew exactly where it would lead. Here's the strange part. The hole was never meant to trap you forever. It was only meant to open, just wide enough, just long enough, for you to forget you were standing at the edge of something else entirely. So what is this hole, really? And why does it feel like falling? Start with a number. The average person checks their phone somewhere between 90 and 150 times a day. Some studies push that figure even higher, especially among teenagers. Multiply that across a week and you get a picture that feels almost impossible. Hundreds of small surrenders. Hundreds of tiny moments where attention is handed over, one glance at a time. Neuroscientist Trevor Haynes, writing at Harvard's Science Communication program, traced this behavior back to something much older than smartphones. Dopamine, not the chemical of pleasure, as most people assume, but the chemical of anticipation. It doesn't reward you for what you found. It rewards you for what you might find next. This matters because it means the pull isn't coming from the content itself. It's coming from the uncertainty around it. Think about a slot machine. You don't pull the lever because you know you'll win. You pull it because you might. That maybe is the entire engine. Psychologist B.F. Skinner discovered this decades ago, long before screens existed. He called it a variable ratio reward schedule. Reward an animal unpredictably, and it will work harder to get that reward than if you rewarded it every single time. Your phone runs on the exact same schedule. Every scroll might reveal something delightful, or nothing. You don't know until you look, so you keep looking. Feel that for a second. The thing you thought was your curiosity might just be a lever, and you, without meaning to, have been pulling it. Does that unsettle you? It should, a little. Now push further back, long before notifications, before screens, before electricity. Your ancestors were built by a different kind of unpredictability. Foraging for food meant walking long stretches with nothing, then suddenly finding a berry patch. That unpredictability kept early humans searching, moving, exploring. It kept them alive. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies, including long-term field research among groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, have described this exact rhythm. Long stretches of nothing, sudden bursts of reward. The brain evolved to chase that rhythm because chasing it once meant survival. Here is the twist. The same wiring that once sent your ancestors into the grasslands now sends you into your feed. The hunt didn't disappear. It just moved indoors, and it moved into your pocket. You are not broken. You are ancient. And something modern is pulling on threads that are hundreds of thousands of years old. But knowing the wiring isn't broken doesn't mean the wiring is safe from being used against you. Because somewhere between Skinner's pigeons and your phone, this stopped being an accident of nature and became a design choice. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, spent years warning about exactly this. He described an entire industry built around something he called the attention economy. Companies don't primarily sell you products anymore. They sell your attention to advertisers. And attention, unlike money, can't be saved. It can only be spent right now, in this moment, or lost forever. That single fact changes everything about how apps are built. Autoplay removes the moment where you might stop and ask if you want more. Infinite scroll removes the natural ending that used to exist at the bottom of a newspaper page or the last page of a book. Notifications interrupt you specifically because interruption creates a small itch, and the only thing that scratches it is opening the app. None of this is conspiracy. It's published. It's studied. Researchers like psychologist Jian Twenge, who analyzed data from hundreds of thousands of teenagers, found a sharp shift in mental health markers that closely tracked the rise of smartphone ownership around 2012. Correlation isn't proof of a single cause, and the research community still debates the size of the effect. But the pattern is hard to ignore, and it's why psychiatrist Anna Lembke, in her work on modern dopamine culture, describes many of today's apps less like tools and more like substances. Something you take, something you crave, something that leaves you a little emptier each time the high fades. So here is the reframe. This was never really about phones. It's about time, and about who gets to spend yours. Every hour inside the loop is an hour that used to belong to something else. A conversation, a walk, a page in a sketchbook. Ask yourself honestly. When was the last time you sat with boredom instead of numbing it? When was the last time your hands were doing something instead of your thumbs simply scrolling? Here is where it gets personal. Think back to being a child. Nearly every child draws, not because someone taught them technique, because creating something from nothing is one of the oldest human urges there is. Cave paintings in places like Lascaux and Chauvet, some over 30,000 years old, weren't made for money or attention. They were made because the impulse to mark the world, to leave something behind, is written into the species. At some point, for most people, that urge quietly stops. Not because it disappears, because something louder took its place. A feed that never ends, offering something new every single time you check, is a difficult thing to compete with. Especially for an unfinished drawing that might not turn out the way you imagined. But here is the counterintuitive part. The drawing was never supposed to turn out perfectly. That was never the point. The point was the act itself. The focus. The small, quiet satisfaction of making something exist that didn't exist a moment ago. That feeling doesn't come from anticipation the way a notification does. It comes from presence. And presence is exactly what the loop is designed to interrupt. So what does fighting back actually look like? Not deleting every app in a fit of guilt. Not swearing off screens forever, only to return to them within a week. Real change tends to be smaller and stranger than that. Researchers studying habit formation, including work associated with psychologist Wendy Wood at the University of Southern California, have found that habits change most reliably not by removing an old behavior, but by making a new one easier to reach than the old one. Leave the sketchbook open on the table instead of closed in a drawer. Put the phone in another room before bed instead of on the nightstand. Small shifts in friction change behavior more than willpower ever does. Move your body somewhere without a screen. Help someone in a way that can't be captured for a post. Sit outside without recording it. Pick up a pencil, badly, and draw something ugly on purpose, just to remember what it feels like to make instead of consume. None of this erases the internet or its usefulness. It has connected people across oceans, preserved knowledge, given voice to communities who never had one before. The whole isn't evil by nature, but like any whole, it's worth knowing exactly how deep you've walked into it, and whether you still remember the way back out. So think again about that number, 90 to 150 times a day. Multiply it across a year, across a decade, across a childhood, and you begin to see the real cost. Not of any single glance, but of the life quietly built, glance by glance in its shadow. Somewhere, right now, a child is picking up a device instead of a crayon. Somewhere, an adult is scrolling instead of sleeping. Somewhere, a version of you from years ago is still waiting for you to remember what it felt like to create something with your own 2 hands, instead of consuming what someone else designed for you to crave. The lever is still there. It will always be there. But tonight, you get to decide whether you pull it again, or whether, for the first time in a long time, you simply put it down.